One cold night, a struggling nurse and her little boy were stranded in the rain until a billionaire single dad appeared. She didn't know helping her would cost him his heart and almost his life.
The rain had been falling since dawn, turning the parking lot of the Crescent Plaza into a mirror of puddles and silver ripples. By late afternoon, the sky hung heavy, dark and tired, much like Lilian herself. After a 12-hour shift at the hospital, all she wanted was to get home, warm some leftover soup, and let her 4-year-old son, Jakes, fall asleep on her lap the way he always did. But life had its own sense of humor. Jakes clung to her back like a tiny koala, his red raincoat hood covering half his face. "Mommy, I'm cold," he murmured, head resting on her shoulder. "I know, sweetheart. We'll be home soon," Lilian promised as she unlocked her aging car. The engine had been coughing and complaining for weeks, but today it decided to stage a full rebellion. She turned the key once, nothing. Twice, a weak click. Third time, the dashboard flickered, then went dark. Oh no, not now. She closed her eyes, feeling her shoulders drop. The wind picked up, blowing cold droplets into their faces. Cars passed slowly, drivers rushing home, no one paying attention to the exhausted nurse standing helplessly beside her dying sedan. Until one car did. A sleek, black SUV rolled to a gentle stop beside her. The window lowered, and a man leaned slightly toward her through the rain, his expression warm yet concerned. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice deep, steady, and strangely comforting. Lilian straightened, adjusting Jakes on her back. "I'm fine, just car trouble." "Do you need help?" He looked like someone who should be stepping out of a business magazine, clean-cut, charismatic, hair neatly brushed back despite the drizzle. His jacket looked expensive enough to pay 2 months of her rent. He immediately felt awkward. "Oh, no, it's fine. I'll call roadside service," she said quickly, even though she couldn't afford another unexpected expense. The man nodded gently, not pushing. "I wouldn't recommend waiting out here in this weather, especially with your little one." His gaze softened on Jakes, who peeked shyly over Lilian's shoulder. "I can give you both a ride home, and I'll send my mechanic to come check your car." Lilian blinked. Who offers something like that to a stranger? And what kind of man casually says, "my mechanic," like it's the most normal thing? She hesitated. Jakes tugged her collar, whispering, "Mommy, I want to go home." The man extended a calm smile. "I promise I'm not dangerous. My name is Ralph." Ralph. A simple name, yet something about him didn't feel simple at all. Still, she trusted her instincts. They had kept her and Jake safe for 4 years, and right now, they weren't warning her. Instead, they whispered something unexpected. "He means no harm." "All right," she said softly. "Thank you." Ralph smiled, widened just a little, warm enough to ease the knot in her stomach. He stepped out, opening the back door of his SUV with practiced gentleness. "Hop in. It's warm inside." The moment they entered, Lilian noticed how spacious and spotless the interior was. Jakes, who had been shivering a minute ago, let out a small sigh of relief. Ralph drove with the care of someone familiar with protecting precious cargo. He asked nothing intrusive, made no attempt to show off, and didn't try to sound heroic. He simply drove, occasionally glancing at Jakes through the rearview mirror with a soft smile. Halfway home, Jakes leaned forward and asked, "Do you have kids?" Ralph nodded. "I do. A 6-year-old boy named Dave." Jakes' eyes lit up. "I'm 4. "Well," Ralph chuckled, "that means you're almost as grown up as he is." Lilian watched the small interaction, surprised by how natural Ralph was with children, how gentle, how patient. As they neared her apartment, she felt a swirl of confusion and gratitude. She barely knew this man, yet he appeared at the exact moment she needed help. Fate rarely knocked on her door, but tonight it rode in a black SUV.
Lilian awoke the next morning with that strange feeling that something unusual had happened the night before, something that wasn't a dream but didn't quite feel real either. As she brewed her instant coffee, the memory returned. The rain, her stubborn car, and the man named Ralph, who had appeared like a calm beacon in the storm. She shook her head, almost laughing. A stranger giving me a ride home, and wanting to send a mechanic? She murmured to herself. Unbelievable. Jakes ran into the kitchen in his superhero pajamas, his curls sticking up in every direction. "Mommy, is the car still broken?" "I don't know, baby. We'll check it later." She didn't want to get his hopes up with promises she couldn't keep. But she didn't have to. A knock sounded at the door. Lilian frowned. She rarely had visitors, and no one ever came this early. She opened the door to find a neatly dressed man in a black jacket holding a clipboard. "Good morning, ma'am. I'm here to return your vehicle keys." "My what?" "Your car is repaired. Mr. Carter sent me." Her breath caught. "Mr. Carter?" "Yes, ma'am. Ralph Carter." The name meant nothing to her, at least not in a way it should have. The mechanic continued politely. "He asked me to inspect the entire vehicle. I replaced the battery and fixed 2 wiring issues. It's in excellent condition now." Lilian blinked several times. "He paid for this?" "It's taken care of," the mechanic replied with a respectful nod. Mr. Carter insisted. She didn't know what to say. Gratitude, confusion, and disbelief tangled in her chest. Who was this man? Jakes peeked from behind her legs. "Is the car all better?" "It's perfect," the mechanic said with a smile, almost like new. After he left, Lilian stood there holding the keys, stunned. She wanted to call Ralph and say thank you, but she didn't even have his number. As if the universe heard her thoughts, another knock came. This time when she opened the door, Ralph himself stood there, hands in his pockets, rein-free, and looking effortlessly composed. Behind him, holding a small toy car, stood a bright-eyed 6-year-old boy. Dave. "Morning," Ralph said, his warm smile instantly calming her racing heart. "I thought I'd check if the repairs were done properly." And Dave insisted on meeting Jakes. Dave stepped forward shyly. "Hi." Jakes gasped in excitement. "You have toys!" Just like that, the 2 children bonded as if they knew each other for years. Ralph chuckled. "His social skills are better than mine." Lilian found herself smiling. "Thank you for everything. You didn't have to do all this." "I know," Ralph replied gently, "but I wanted to." She opened her mouth to protest, but before she could say anything more, her neighbor, Mrs. Green, walked by, froze mid-step, and stared. "Is that Ralph Carter?" Lilian glanced at her blankly. "Yes, he helped me last night." Mrs. Green's jaw dropped. "Lilian, he's one of the richest men in the entire state." Ralph gave an awkward smile, clearly used to such reactions. Lilian, on the other hand, felt her stomach twist. Her simple world suddenly felt too small, too fragile. She looked back at Ralph with new eyes, his calm confidence, his quiet luxury, the SUV, the mechanic, everything made sense now. "You're that Ralph Carter?" she asked softly. "I am, but I'm also just a dad who wanted to help." Her heart softened, but worry settled in its place. People in Ralph's world normally didn't cross paths with people in hers. Dave tugged Ralph's sleeve. "Dad, can we stay and play?" Ralph looked at her carefully, almost asking permission without words. Lilian nodded slowly. "Yes, they can play." As the boys ran inside laughing, Lilian realized something unsettling. Ralph Carter hadn't just repaired her car. He had gently stepped into her life, and she wasn't sure whether to welcome him or protect herself from the storm he might bring. The following weekend arrived faster than Lilian expected. She spent most of it working double shifts, leaving little time to think about Ralph, though somehow he still lingered at the corners of her thoughts. Her repaired car ran smoothly, and every time she started it, she found herself whispering a silent thank you to him. She hadn't planned on seeing him again, but Ralph had a different idea. Sunday morning, her phone buzzed unexpectedly. "Ralph, good morning, Lilian. If you and Jakes are free, Dave would love another playdate. There's a small event at a park this afternoon. Nothing fancy, just kids having fun." "Nothing fancy," Lilian murmured, raising a brow. She didn't know why, but she said yes. Maybe she wanted Jakes to have a fun day. Maybe she was curious about Ralph. Maybe she liked the way he made her feel, seen, valued, and strangely safe. Whatever the reason, she and Jakes ended up at the park by noon. At least, she thought it was a park. What she saw made her breath catch. The place wasn't a public park. It was a private recreation area built inside a gated property that stretched wider than any park she had ever visited. There were manicured lawns, a shimmering artificial lake, staff members in uniform, and security stationed discreetly near every entrance. Ralph hadn't lied. There were kids having fun, but he'd left out the part where nothing fancy meant a multi-million-dollar playground. She froze at the entrance, suddenly self-conscious in her modest jeans and simple blouse. Jakes tugged excitedly on her hand. "Mommy, look! They have a big slide, and swings, and whoa!" Dave ran toward them, followed by Ralph, who was dressed casually, but somehow looked like he stepped straight out of a fashion catalog. "You made it," Ralph said, genuinely pleased. "I'm glad." Lilian forced a smile. "This is beautiful. It's just a small place we use for company family events. Today it's almost empty. Perfect for the boys." Small place? She could fit her entire apartment complex in the parking area alone. Jakes and Dave ran ahead, immediately climbing one of the huge, colorful structures. Ralph watched them with quiet affection before turning to her. "May I walk with you?" She nodded, though her heart beat faster at his closeness. They strolled along the path, the soft sound of children laughing echoing behind them. Lilian kept her hands folded tightly, trying to act normal, though every detail around her reminded her how different their worlds were. Ralph sensed her unease. "You're uncomfortable," he said gently. She sighed, a small embarrassed laugh escaping. "I'm trying not to be. It's just all this. It's so far from my reality." Ralph nodded slowly. "I believe or not. I understand." "How could you possibly?" she asked before she could stop herself. Ralph stopped walking. His gaze shifted toward the lake, deep and thoughtful. "I wasn't always wealthy. My parents struggled. My dad worked 3 jobs. My mom cleaned offices at night. I built my company from nothing. But success, it changes how people see you, sometimes in ways you never asked for." Lilian's expression softened. She hadn't expected vulnerability from a billionaire. "And raising Dave alone." Ralph's jaw tightened. "My ex-wife loved luxury more than family. When Dave was born, she left, said she wasn't built for simple motherhood. I've raised him since." Lilian felt something twist in her chest. Pain, recognized pain. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Ralph looked at her, eyes sincere. "You're the first person I've talked to like this in years, Lilian. You make it easy." Her heart warmed, her guard slipping, just slightly. But their moment was interrupted by whispers from across the field. A cluster of well-dressed women watched them with sharp eyes, whispering behind manicured hands. Who is she? Not one of the executive's wives. Maybe someone he's entertaining. Lilian's face flushed. Ralph noticed immediately. "Ignore them," he said. But the words stung. She wasn't part of this world. She didn't know if she ever could be. As Jakes and Dave ran toward them laughing, Lilian forced a smile. But one truth echoed in her heart. Ralph Carter's world was too big, and hers was too small, and she was terrified of being swallowed by it. The week that followed was chaos, a type Lilian knew all too well. 2 nurses called in sick, the hospital had a surge of emergency cases, and she found herself pulled into a double shift that left no time to breathe, let alone think about Ralph and his too-perfect world. By Wednesday morning, she was running on 3 hours of sleep and a cup of stale coffee. She dropped Jake's at school, kissed his cheek, and hurried toward the hospital while mentally reviewing her patient list. She didn't hear her phone's battery dying. By noon, the hospital was buzzing with urgency. A multi-vehicle accident flooded the emergency wing, and Lilian was assigned to assist with triage. She swallowed her exhaustion and focused, pushing aside all thoughts except the one thing she knew how to do well: help people. Hours blurred. She didn't eat, she didn't rest, she didn't check her phone because it wasn't even on. Back at Jake's school, a different storm was unfolding. Jake's had developed a fever, fast and unexpectedly. He shivered during class and complained of a headache, prompting his teacher to call Lilian. The call went straight to voicemail. They tried again and again. Still nothing. Worried, the school staff searched through Jake's emergency contact file. The first number was Lilian's. The second was Ralph Carter, accidentally added during the playdate paperwork. At 2:47 p.m., Ralph was in the middle of a board meeting, his top executives discussing quarterly projections, when his phone buzzed. "Mr. Carter, this is Bright Steps Academy. We have Jake's here. He's sick, and we can't reach his mother." Ralph stood so quickly that his chair rolled back. "I'm on my way." The room fell silent. "But sir," his assistant began. "Cancel the rest of my schedule." "But the investors." "Cancel it." He didn't wait for further objections. Minutes later, he was in his helicopter, the city shrinking below him as he flew toward the school. His mind raced. Jake's was like a smaller, livelier version of Dave, a child who had charmed him from the moment he peeked over Lilian's shoulder. The thought of him sick and alone churned something fierce and protective in his chest. He landed on the school's rooftop helipad and rushed down the stairs. Jake's lay on a cot in the nurse's station, cheeks flushed, eyes glassy. The moment he saw Ralph, he whispered, "I want my mommy." Ralph knelt beside him. "I know, buddy. I'll take you home, all right? I won't leave you." He carried Jake's to the SUV waiting outside, wrapped him in a blanket, and called his personal doctor to meet them at Lilian's apartment. By 6 p.m., Lilian finally ended her shift, exhausted but relieved the worst was over. She pulled out her phone to call the school, only to find the screen black. Her stomach dropped. Please no. She sprinted to her car, fumbling for the charger, but the phone refused to power on. Panic clawed at her chest. She drove faster than she should have, heart thundering. When she burst into her apartment, she froze. Ralph was there, sitting on her couch, holding Jake's in his arms, with Dave beside them. Her small living room looked like a picture from a life she didn't recognize, one in which her son was safe with a man who technically owed her nothing. For a brief second, relief washed over her, then fear, then anger. "What are you doing here?" she demanded, her voice trembling. Ralph rose slowly, still cradling Jake's. "He had a fever. The school couldn't reach you. They called me." "You had no right to pick him up," she snapped, stepping forward and taking Jake's carefully from his arms. Ralph stiffened. "He needed help, Lilian. I got him here safely. My doctor checked him. He's okay, just a mild fever." "That's not the point," Lilian's voice broke. "You don't get to step into my life whenever you want. I can handle my son." Dave's eyes widened, sensing the tension. Ralph exhaled, tone calm but strained. "I didn't overstep. I stepped in because you weren't reachable and your child was sick." A knife of guilt stabbed her, but she pushed it aside.
This is exactly why I shouldn't get close to people like you. Your world swallows everything, even my decisions." Ralph's expression dimmed, hurt flickering through his eyes. "Lilian, I was only trying to help. I didn't ask for your help." Silence fell like a weight. Ralph looked at her one last time, something unspoken breaking in his gaze, before picking up Dave's hand. "Come on," he said softly to his son. "Let's go." And as the door closed behind them, Lilian felt the apartment grow painfully quiet. She held Jake's tightly, heart aching with the terrible feeling that she had just pushed away the one person who had truly cared. She replayed the argument again and again, each time hearing her own voice sharper than she intended, each word steeped in fear rather than truth. She had lashed out not because Ralph was wrong, but because he had been too right. He cared. He stepped in. He showed up. And somewhere deep inside, that terrified her. Jakes recovered quickly, bouncing around the apartment as though nothing had happened. But Lilian, she couldn't shake the guilt. Every time he laughed, she felt reminded of the man who had rushed to him without hesitation, the man she pushed away. By Thursday afternoon, the skies darkened, and a storm warning echoed through the radio. "Thunderstorms approaching. Stay indoors if possible." Lilian sighed. Storms always made her uneasy. At the hospital, she tried her best to stay focused, but her thoughts drifted. She wondered how Dave was doing, if Ralph was still angry, if he was relieved to be rid of her complications. She wondered if she should apologize, but didn't know how to begin. By early evening, the storm hit. Violent winds, pounding rain, lightning slicing through the sky. The emergency room braced itself as the streets became slick and dangerous. At 7:12 p.m., the hospital doors burst open. 2 paramedics rushed in, pushing a stretcher. "Male, early 30s, car collision, swerved to avoid debris. Pulse stable but unconscious. No major bleeding. Prepare for immediate assessment." Lilian moved on instinct, rushing to assist. But when she reached the stretcher, her breath shattered into pieces. There, lying pale and still, was Ralph. Her heart almost stopped. "No, no, no," she whispered, knees weakening. "Ralph?" He didn't respond. His hair was damp, rainwater dripping from his clothes. A faint bruise marked his forehead. His shirt was torn slightly where the seatbelt had locked against his chest. One of the paramedics spoke quickly. "We found his ID. He regained consciousness at the scene, but passed out again on the way. Blood pressure is stable." Lilian's hands trembled as she helped move him. She forced herself into professional mode, but her insides were spiraling. The nurse beside her murmured, "Poor man, and he's got a kid, right, Dave?" Her throat tightened painfully. She tried to stay calm as they transferred Ralph to a monitoring room. Machines beeped rhythmically, too loud, too sharp. She checked his vitals, her fingers brushing his wrist, the same wrist he used to hand her his jacket when she was cold, the same fingers that fixed Dave's shoelaces patiently, the same hands that carried Jake's when he had a fever. "Ralph," she whispered, unable to hold the tears back this time. "I'm so sorry." The door opened softly. It was one of the interns. "Nurse Lilian, your name is listed as one of his emergency contacts." Her head jerked up. "What?" He handed her a form. "Look, you're right under his son." Her vision blurred. Her chest shook. He had listed her. Even after she pushed him away. Even after she broke his trust. She sank into the chair beside his bed, emotions crashing over her like the storm outside. After nearly 30 minutes, Ralph stirred. His lashes trembled. He winced. "Lilian?" Hearing her name in that frail tone broke something inside her. She leaned closer. "I'm here." He opened his eyes slowly, confusion mixing with relief. You came." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Of course I came. I shouldn't have spoken to you the way I did. I was scared. I'm always scared. And you made everything feel safe. Too safe." Ralph's weak laugh escaped. "I scared you by caring?" "Yes," she admitted in a trembling whisper, "because caring means losing, and I've lost too much." His gaze softened. "You won't lose me." "But you could have," she whispered. "Tonight," she brushed a hand over his cheek, "I thought I'd never get to tell you how sorry I am, how grateful, how much I—" She stopped herself, but Ralph heard the unspoken words anyway. His fingers curled around hers gently. "Lilian," he murmured, "I'm not going anywhere, not unless you push me again. And even then, I might stay." A tearful laugh escaped her. The storm roared outside, but inside the small hospital room, a broken bridge slowly rebuilt itself, this time with truth, vulnerability, and something dangerously close to love.
Ralph recovered more quickly than anyone expected. Within a few days, he was sitting up, cracking quiet jokes, and reassuring Dave that he wasn't going to disappear like superheroes in movies. Lilian stayed with him every moment she could, bringing meals, checking his vitals even when the nurses already had, and talking with him during the quiet hours of the night. But it wasn't guilt that kept her there. It was something gentler, something frightening, something healing. One evening, as Ralph prepared to be discharged, Lilian stood by the window, watching the city lights shimmer across the wet streets. The storm had passed, but the scent of rain still lingered in the air. Ralph walked toward her slowly, one hand on his ribs where the seatbelt bruise still ached. "You're quiet tonight." She looked at him, heart softening. "Just thinking." "About us," she admitted. "And how easily you could have been gone." He stepped closer, eyes warm. "But I'm still here." She nodded, emotions tightening her throat. "And I'm glad you are." They left the hospital together. Ralph, Dave, Jakes, and Lilian, an unlikely group forged by chaos, kindness, and fate. Dave insisted on holding Lilian's hand, while Jakes rode in Ralph's arms, giggling at every joke the billionaire attempted. Their walk to the car felt strangely natural, like a tiny beginning of something bigger. Over the next few weeks, Ralph took things slower than Lilian expected. He didn't overwhelm her with gifts or promises. In fact, he did the opposite. He brought nothing but himself. He didn't offer her money. He didn't offer to fix her apartment or buy her a new car. He didn't try to rescue her from her life. Instead, he offered time. He joined her and Jakes for simple breakfasts and messy dinners. He took the boys to the park, letting them chase pigeons until they fell breathless. Sometimes he just sat on her couch after work, sipping cheap coffee and listening to her talk about her day. Each moment chipped away at the wall around her heart. One Sunday afternoon, Ralph invited Lilian and Jakes to a lakeside villa. Not the extravagant mansion type, but a quiet hideaway filled with warm wood, soft lights, and a private dock that shimmered under the sun. It was peaceful, intimate. Dave was inside baking cookies with the caretaker, leaving Ralph and Lilian alone by the water. The gentle ripple of the lake reflected the sky like a mirror. Ralph took a deep breath. "Lilian, I want to say something, and I hope you listen with your heart, not your fears." She swallowed, eyes locked on the water. "I'm listening." "When I met you in that parking lot, I didn't see a woman who needed saving. I saw a woman who was already saving herself every single day." Her eyes stung, warmth blossoming in her chest. "And I don't want to change your life. I want to be part of it. Not as a billionaire who fixes things, but as a man who loves you. As a father who wants Dave and Jakes to grow together. as someone who wants to come home to you. Not a mansion, not a company, just you. Tears slipped down her cheeks. And I'm not asking for forever today. Just a beginning we can build together. She turned to him fully, heart no longer hiding. Ralph, I've never had someone choose me without conditions, without wanting something in return. But you've given me love without trying to buy it. And that means everything. She stepped into his arms, letting her fears fall away. His forehead rested gently against hers. So, is that a yes? A shaky laugh escaped her. It's a yes. The boys ran outside just then. Jake's with cookie crumbs on his shirt, Dave waving a wooden sailboat. They saw Lilian and Ralph together and cheered without understanding, as if they sensed something wonderful had just begun. Hand in hand, the four of them walked along the lakeside, sunlight warming their faces. The world felt wider, brighter, and full of promise. A new chapter had begun, one written not in wealth, but in love. One born from a rainy night that brought two broken worlds together and healed them both.
3 months had passed since that peaceful afternoon by the lake. 3 months filled with laughter, adjustments, healing, and the gentle weaving together of two once separate lives. Lilian stood in her tiny kitchen, stirring spaghetti sauce, while Jakes and Dave ran in and out of the living room, building an elaborate blanket fort. She listened to their giggles ricocheting through the apartment like tiny bells, and every sound felt like a promise fulfilled. The door opened quietly. Ralph stepped inside, still in his work shirt, sleeves rolled up, tie loosened. He looked tired, but content in a way that only Lilian could bring out in him. "Smells like heaven," he murmured as he slipped behind her, arms circling her waist with a familiarity that still made her blush. "You say that about everything I cook." "That's because you made it," he replied with that low, warm tone that melted through her defenses every time. She turned in his arms, brushing a hand over his cheek. "Long day?" "Long," he admitted, "but knowing I'm coming home to this makes it worth it." Home. He said it so naturally. He didn't mean the apartment, or the walls, or the roof. He meant her. Dinner was chaotic, loud, messy, exactly the kind of chaos Ralph learned to crave. Afterward, as the boys fell asleep inside their blanket fort, Lilian and Ralph sat on the couch, sharing a quiet moment. Ralph took her hand, tracing her knuckles gently. "You know," he said softly, "I used to think success meant owning everything I'd ever dreamed of. But it turns out, the best things aren't bought at all." Lilian leaned her head on his shoulder. "And what's the best thing?" "You," he whispered, kissing the top of her head. "You and these two boys, a life that feels real." The rain began again outside, pattering softly against the windows. The same rain that had once stranded Lilian in a parking lot. The same rain that brought Ralph into her life. She smiled as she closed her eyes. What began as an accident, a coincidence, a storm, became the start of a love story that neither of them saw coming. And this time, Lilian wasn't afraid. This time, she walked into the rain willingly, because now she had someone to walk through it with.